Hi David, this is a quick video to show you how to make a plate within Zbrush. So we've got to start it off, we go to the light box and pick the thick plane from the project file. So lightbox, project, thick plane, say no to that. So here we've got a thick plane, square. What we're going to do is resize it to the dimensions you asked for, 100 by 100 by 2 millimeters. So what we do is we go up to plugins and scroll down to Scale Master. And the first thing we've got to do in the Scale Master is set the overall scene scale. Click this button and we're going to pick millimeters. Don't worry about the size because we're going to change that shortly. So we'll pick millimeters. So this is now 2 millimeters by 2 millimeters by 0.015, and we're going to change it to 100. So make sure that both of these buttons are set to millimeters because that's the units we're going to work in. This button here this R button, when switched on, will lock the size of the piece to the ratio that you started with. So whatever I do to it, it changes in proportion. So we want to turn that off because we want to make specific values in X, Y, and Z. I have Zbrush set up so that if you can see the ground plane here, I have it set up with Z in a different axis to the default setup of Zbrush, so that when I move it into other packages, it comes in facing up the right way. So you may have to swap some of these around. For me, Z is this thickness working up here. Z is the blue line for me. If I zoom in here, this blue dimension is Z on my Zbrush because that's the way I've set it up, but you may find that Z for you is the green axis heading this way. So you'll have to experiment with that. But what we do is simply type in the numbers we want. So 100, click enter, 100, click enter, and 2, click enter, resize subtool, and there it is. When you input these numbers, what I have found is that using the number pad on my keyboard and the enter button on my number pad does not work. I have to use the keys on the main section of the keyboard. I don't know why that is, but it will not accept numbers typed in via the keypad of my keyboard, even though they appear on the the screen when I type them in. It just doesn't want to play. I don't know why that is. So use the main number line on your keyboard and the main enter button as well. Right, once we've got the plate to the size we want, then we can go over to geometry, and at the moment it's 2,418 polygons, which is probably not enough to get the detail you want. And you can see how coarse that is. What we're going to do is you can subdivide it then. If you recall, we went through this once before, that you go to geometry and divide will divide up the geometry and give it a higher resolution. But if you turn off this button here, SMT, that will prevent the shape from distorting when it's divided. So if I leave that button on and I click divide, let's see what's happening. It's starting to round off these edges here, which we don't necessarily want to do. So if we turn that off and then divide, you'll see that it's keeping the edge shape of the piece. So that button will allow you to subdivide without changing the structure of what it is you're working on, which is quite handy. It's not so much of a problem for this because it's just a square plate, but if you're making something with a more complex shape, then it might make a difference. 38,000, so we can just keep hitting this until we get to a point where we're happy with. 600, you can go up to 2.5 million. It all depends where you want to be with that. Then once you've done that, I'm going to remove one of those. So that's our plate, that size, with the polygons raised up. If you want to save it, then just go over to here, click as you would do with anything else, export, and then just save it. Thick plane, yes, and that is job done.